Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're going to be talking about Blessed Carlo Acutis.
That's right. We're going to be talking about this youthful next saint, and we're lucky to be joined by Dario Mobini, who's the director of worldyouthday.com, and show how this saint can be a model for young people in today's world. Let's get started.
All right, we got a great show for you guys today. A very, very powerful young saint, a model for a lot of our youth today. We're going to be going through John Paul II's vision for young people in World Youth Day, Blessed Carlo's story, which is so powerful. And hopefully we'll come away with a lot of hope for our youth today. And Dario, welcome. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'd love to be here.
You know, Blessed Carlo really is, typically when you think of a Catholic saint, you think of these mystical, distant figures climbing a mountain in a tattered old brown habit and having these grand mystical experiences of bringing down fire from, the skies to smite the heathens. But Blessed Carlo was a guy like, probably you've met a million times. He was a nice, normal kid. He loved video games. He, loved going to school. He had friends. He was a normal kid. But underneath all that, he had a profound faith, and a profound faith, particularly in the Eucharist and in the saints. And I think his example is a model forward for what kids today, younger people, can be and experience in this world while still having a saintly character. So, Dario, can you tell us a little bit of the background about Blessed Carlo and what makes him so special and so unique?
Yeah, goodness. It was just, Blessed Carlo was only introduced to us maybe no more than 6 years ago, right during the Synod on the Youth that was going on in Rome. Pope Francis mentions the name. You guys need to check out Carlo Acutis. He is a rock solid saint. You will love his story. And his story was already picking up. Everyone was kind of interested in who's this kid? Who's this kid? They dubbed him like the new Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati because of just his love for the poor, his love of the Eucharist, his love of his friends, his love of sports, and just an outgoing kid altogether. But that letter that came out, Christus Vivit, that was the post synod document that Pope Francis wrote after the Synod on the Youth, echoed, be like him, check him out, get to know him. And immediately it started this big movement towards getting to know Carlo that led ultimately to his beatification in 2021, I think, or 22, close to 2022. But it was literally right as soon as COVID had hit, people weren't able to travel. So it was like a remote beatification. And yet people were drawn to him because from the very beginning, he had a simple life. And yet nothing extraordinary about him. And that's the beauty of the saints, right? Sometimes we find the extraordinary in the ordinary things. There's extraordinary love in the ordinary ways. And Carlo had it. One of his famous quotes is, everybody is born an original, but many people end up dying as photocopies. And I thought to myself, oh, that's great. I want to read more. What does this kid have to say about, being a saint? And then he goes further. You too can be a saint, but you need to want it. With your whole heart, and you have to have and if you don't have a desire for it right now, you ask the Lord for it, and you will see He will give it to you. Again, this is a young boy who, at the age of 15, dies tragically of leukemia, and once finding out that he was dying of leukemia, he told his doctors and his mom, who was sitting next to him at his bedside, saying, what, I'm destined to die, but I'm glad. You know what? I'm glad to die this way because I have not spent one moment doing anything that would not displease the Lord. He had disciplined himself in such a way that he would not do things that would displease the Lord. And I remember reading about his story again. This is back in 2018, thinking who is this kid? Who is this kid? Pope Francis said we should check him out. That he would discipline himself to be on the internet for no more than an hour a week. That's not just the internet, but also video games. Mind you, as a teenager, like especially preteen and teenager, to say like, I'm going to discipline myself. So not to play video games and to be on the internet for more than an hour a week is extraordinary. Like,
I want to make my
in
kid
today's
do a
world.
novena to Blessed Carlo to get off of Fortnite so much.
But I mean, and that's the thing that Carlo was able to realize in it. He had PlayStation 1. I know some of us are like scratching our head, be like, whoa, PlayStation, there was a 1? Yeah, there was a 1 at one point. And Blessed Carlo owned one, and the mom gave him one because he was the only child in the family. Typical family situation that spoiled the kid, right? Maybe give him whatever he wants. Maybe he'll find happiness, or he'll find an avenue of something to keep him busy. But yet he didn't use that to keep himself busy. He used it to find entertainment, but yet he knew that if he spent too much time on this, that he would go into areas of his life that he didn't want to go into. So he knew this, but this started way younger than his preteens. I mean, like, look at his story. Born in England in the late 90s. So mind you, like, he is a millennial. That's the first thing we need to remember. He's a millennial, right? So, like, for us in Generation X, and there's others that are millennials, you're going to be amazed at the fact that he's the first millennial saint to be beatified by the Catholic Church. Like, we have Blessed Carabadano, Generation X. We have Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, who was probably from the greatest generation, died in the 1920s. Like, Carlo is more modern than anything because he was born in the late 90s. He has the internet. Like, mind you, he's got the internet, like, at that period of time. What saint do we know had to deal with the internet, and let alone all the filters that I'm sure his mom had no clue on? But Carlo was very, very well tech savvy, that he knew that there was also garbage on the internet that he didn't want to, go to. And that's another reason why he disciplined himself later on in his life. But at a very young age.
I would love to see St. Paul with an internet connection.
Right?
That would be so epic. I mean, he'd be the guy in the chat forums. He'd be on Catholic Answers. He'd be like, no. He'd be sending like emails to the Ephesians. St. Paul would be able to use the internet, I think, pretty adeptly.
But no, I mean, even Zoom, I'm like, wouldn't you think he would be zooming into the Corinthians, be like, hey, come on, guys, listen, you guys are not getting it right. You're missing the point what I said. Why are you interpreting my writings in the wrong way? I doubt it. I mean, the joke of the times, right? But
something I always say with, Ryan and I, our work in this, our day job is we do marketing for Catholic organizations through our company, Fusati. And one of the things that I explain to our clients a lot of times when they might be having a little bit of reticence adopting a new technology is I make the analogy that technology and the internet, things like, Instagram and Twitter and Google and YouTube, these are the Roman roads of the 21st century. And just like the apostles used the Roman road system, which was the peak of technology at the time, right? Never before had the world been so connected. In today's day and age, modern apostles have to use what are the equivalent of the Roman roads, and that's the internet.
Yeah.
And if you're not on there, or if you're on there and you're not using it to be an apostle, then you're misusing it, because that's exactly what the apostles would do. And I think that's really does speak to the example of Blessed Carlo, is that that's exactly what he did. So one of the things the big project that he undertook was he built that website around Eucharistic miracles, which I did a little research beforehand. That website is still up and running, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's called Miracoli Eucharistici. And I'll put the link to it here so that you guys can see it and go take a look at it. A website built by soon to be a saint. That's awesome.
The first time
cool
we've ever been able to say that as a church.
Right?
Honestly.
Yes,
like,
absolutely. But even go further on that one, I met a guy who came up to me in one of my presentations that I gave on Carlo, who said to me, hey, I checked out his website and I looked at the coding. Like, he was way beyond his time in coding. Like, he was like, by the time I was 30, I figured it out. And like, this kid is doing it at the age of 13 and 14, coding as like an adult and knowing how to do it in such a way that it so-called, I mean, for those who are listening in and you're like, the algorithms, fancy terminology, but he figured out an algorithm to get you cooked and connected to his website. You Googled Eucharistic miracles, his website popped up, but he knew how to do that at a young age. And it was self-taught. And he didn't look up like, how do you do this? And someone teach it to me. He was that interested in knowing how effective that evangelization tool could be, that he went all in on it. I mean, and again, it tells you a little bit about Carlo's passion, that he knew that if people, and again, going back to the Eucharist, he knew that if people knew of the power of the Eucharist, that they would fall in love with the person of Jesus. Like they knew, like, so how better to help people fall in love with Jesus Christ? Get to know him in the Eucharist of the church. Look at his miracles. Look at how much conversions have occurred through the miracles of going to the Eucharist. He called the Eucharist his highway to heaven. Like he knew that nothing was more important in his life than to spend time before the Blessed Sacrament. He used to have those hours like dedicated in his life specifically for adoration. We'll get back to that though.
Well, Ryan, I know
cut in and out.
Eucharistic adoration, Ryan, was, integral to your conversion and to mine too. I mean, my reversion happened in front of the Eucharist, not on a whim, but on an urge. I signed up for 1 a.m. Eucharistic adoration, did that for 6 months, and I've never been the same. Ryan, and you have a similar story. I mean, moved in next door to one?
Yeah. I moved next door to Adoration Chapel and was in there for over a year and a half every day, just healing and honestly just hungering for his presence in my life and the peace and the that surpasses all things, only given to us in Christ in the Eucharist, only given to us there. You can pray and receive peace, like all of our brothers and sisters that aren't Catholic, but this is a very, very special blessing that the Catholic Church has received that is definitely worth sharing. And I see Carlo is all about it too as well. It's a beautiful thing. Where was he from? So he was born in England, but did he grow up in Italy? Because that's where his remains are.
Yes, I mean he born in England, and he was the only child, and then the mother and father decided to move to Milan, where he basically grew up. Most of his youth, his childhood was in Milan, living in a very affluent area. And then all of a sudden he started to realize, man, there's more to life than just this affluent life that I'm being given. He started seeing the poor around him. He started seeing those beautiful churches that he wanted to visit. I mean, imagine like a little kid seeing the history of Milan, where you got St. Ambrose not too far, the teacher of St. Augustine, like buried next door to you. Something cool like that, which some of us don't have the blessings to be able to just walk down the street and be like, hey, let's go visit St. Charles Borromeo. Let's go hang out with him and commune with him and pray and asking him for the graces, to intercede for us so that we can get the graces to defend the faith. But I mean, goodness, like he, at the very young age, convinced his mom to make frequent trips to visit churches because he wanted to visit his friend. I mean, that was his life program in his life. That was it. Always be united to Jesus. This is my program in my life. And at a very young age, it wasn't his mom or dad that decided, hey, we need to go to church. Like, I think it's the power of baptism. If anything, if we look at that and we say, what does baptism do to the soul of the child when they're adopted into that divine family? Like, it was literally a crashing wave into Carlo's life. He knew, like, from the very small life that he needed to make his trips to visiting the churches. He would walk with his mom to a church, not to a church, but let's just say he was walking down the street and there was a church, right? Hey, Mom, can we go visit Jesus? Sure. What mother would say no, right? Sure. So it started becoming a habit. Every church they would walk by, he would say, hey, can we go say hi to Jesus? At a young age, he started doing this, and the mom started seeing some really big supernatural movements happening in his life, to the fact that it wasn't just about Jesus. It was also the love that he had for Our Lady, that he would want to stop at the florist and buy flowers so that he can give some flowers to Our Lady. But then, but not only for Our Lady, but also for you, Mom. I mean, that was the beautiful thing of Carlo. He was such a lovely, ordinary child that also there was something special about him, and you kind of knew it. And that's what the beautiful thing that his mom always recounts in her presentations about her son. There was something beautiful about Carlo, such simplicity, but yet so much love and passion, not just for himself, but for others. He said, very similar to John the Baptist, more Jesus and less of me has to be. And that's the only way it's going to be. It has to be less of me, more of others, more of Jesus.
Yeah. I remember going through my conversion. I think this is another very important thing for our audience to think about, especially with young people. Most people listening to this have some form of faith, and so. But when I had my conversion, at the time I was a very broken kid, and had this conversion. I was going to Eucharistic adoration. This is before I moved. And my mother noticed something about me, and I had a rosary, and I would be praying the rosary. And so she started picking up the rosary silently without me knowing, going to adoration silently without me knowing, just seeing her own son, this child who, is now an adult that she's loved so intimately, moving and spending time before the Blessed Sacrament and praying the rosary. And I'll never forget, I walked into the office that was in our home, and my mother was kind of sitting there, and she was kind of emotional. And I just remember her crying and saying, "Are you okay? Like, how are you doing?" And she's like, "I just never knew she was there." And I'm like, who's she? Like, what are you talking about? Now, mind you, I didn't know she was praying the rosary. I didn't, like, it was all like kind of behind my back type thing, just kind of exploring this, like making sure her son's not going crazy or something, maybe. I don't know. And I'm like, who's she? She says, "This is Mary, the Blessed Virgin. Like, I'm praying a rosary." And I never knew that she was there. I grew up Catholic, right? I was kind of like the, so every Sunday, pray over meals. And there was no like passionate devotion to any of these things that God's gifted us with the church. So there you have this moment, and through no real doing of my own, just sort of experiencing this reversion, now the ripple effects of that are occurring in the family. And I think this is so very important because Blessed Carlo also had a significant impact on his family too, as well, especially his mother,
Yeah, Ryan, in preparing for this episode, I was reading a little bit more about Blessed Carlo. His parents were, baptized nominal Catholics, but they were not practicing Catholics in any sense at all.
No.
They were Italian.
They're Italian.
Stop
You
it.
can say that because you're Italian.
No, stop it. Hey, I'm Italian.
I can agree
Come
with
on
that
now.
because I'm Slovenian, so I can agree with the Italian joke.
So I can say it a little bit, right?
Yeah, Dario, would you tell us a little bit more about his religious upbringing? Because from my understanding, his parents were religious, but he started to find religion after the death of his grandfather and having a dream. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing that really drew Carlo more than anything is that those small little visits. Right after baptism, he started making small little visits to the church. He knew, like, having a friendship with Jesus is key. It's integral. He saw it with his family, especially his extended family. But his mom wasn't really practicing the faith. So, I mean, how did the mom get to do what she did? I mean, I remember hearing a story that the mom had to learn the faith from scratch because Carlo was inquisitive and he kept asking, "Mom, what about the Trinity? Mom, what about the Eucharist?" And the mom was like, "I don't know. I'll find out. I'll get back to you." So she would literally go back and study the faith so that way she can present it to him. And with that, she fell in love with the faith. But I don't know if you know this story, which is really cool. A story of when he was around 4 years old, there was a Hindu man by the name of Rajesh who joined the family to help out, in helping the family out. Like, mind you, this is just a guy who comes in and works at home because the Acutis family could afford also a butler or a maid or something of that nature, right? And so Rajesh came and worked in this house, and Carlo was at 4, and he accompanied Carlo everywhere Carlo wanted to go. So stay with him. I mean, can you imagine a parent just saying, "Hey, just stay with him wherever he goes"? And Carlo's like, "Let's go to church. Let's go visit Our Lady. Let's go mass." And Rajesh, who's a Hindu, he's like, "I don't understand this kid at all. I don't get it. What is driving this kid?" And in those special moments, Rajesh kept looking and just keep being mystified. And get this, by the age of when he's 10 or 11, Rajesh enters into the Catholic Church because of the witness of Blessed Carlo Acutis, a young boy who's not even a teenager at that point, shares the faith, learns the catechism together, and not only shares the faith, but articulates the faith in such a way that it's like, whoa, you didn't even go to religion class, bro. Like, how did you learn this? And he's got this supernatural gift of just absorbing the faith and just falling in love with it. He reads from the catechism, he reads from sacred scripture, and he's able to articulate it in such an amazing way that Rajesh is like, dude, I am all in. Whatever you love, I am in love with it too. You showed me what it means to be authentic, and I can see it in you. Rajesh enters the Catholic Church, and guess who's his sponsor? Carlo Acutis. Like, there's a beautiful picture of Carlo Acutis just smiling with Rajesh, because he knows, like, hey, that's my first soul that I was able to help bring into the faith. And I think of like an amazing saint like Saint Therese, of Lisieux, right? Who also prayed for others to come in. I mean, she had these little adopted sons and daughters that she prayed for. And Carlo just had this natural gift of absorbing the faith and quickly applying it to his own life. I mean, if anything, if you want to look at like what has really drawn him more than anything, like, it's just the love that kept growing once he realized the importance of the Eucharist. Like, he had this amazing quote that I really liked, that I thought to myself, like, and I'm in my late 40s, and I thought to myself, I was in tears when I read this quote. I said, you go outside and you get a suntan, because the sun is out there, and you're in front of the sun, you get a suntan. But when you go before the Blessed Sacrament and the Eucharist of the Church, you become saints. And I thought, man, it took me so many years to realize the power of the Eucharist. And he got it. Before he even received his own First Holy Communion, he begged his bishop, give me the opportunity to receive First Holy Communion now. Like, because in Italy, it's a little different. It's not like at the age of reason, you're 7 or 8, first or second grade, you get First Holy Communion. No, he wanted to receive it much earlier, because at his diocese in Milan, they were receiving at the age of 10. So 10 or 11, you would receive the Eucharist. He said, no, I wanted it earlier. Don't put it off for me.
Both me and Dela Cross had one of our kids receive the Eucharist early, accidentally.
Two
of them now.
No,
2 kids.
At the age of 2? Or no, 2 kids.
No. I've had 2 kids receive First Holy Communion, and both of them were on family retreats. They saw all the other kids doing it, so they went up there. And now and one of them was in North Georgia, and I've got pictures of them with the priest that bumbled it. Like, here it is.
Yeah, I took my daughter to Mass, and we go up to the altar rail, and I'm kneeling down, and she just would kneel down next to me, and the priest comes by with patting, and she received communion. I'm like, oh no, did you just receive communion? So I go and I see the priest after Mass. I'm like, Father, I think my daughter received communion. What should I do? He's like, what do you mean? What should you do? Go bake her a cake. She just celebrated First Communion.
That's awesome.
Very blessed her, and he's like, go buy her a cake. One of the things that I also heard about Blessed Carlo Acutis is that because his parents were pretty wealthy and fairly busy, right? That he, like you said with Rajesh, he had a series of nannies and people who had helped in his life. And 2 of them were very important early influences. There was an Irish nanny and a Polish nanny, both of them whose witness with the faith, because they spent so much time with him, probably had a pretty sizable impact. So is there anything that you can share about the influence of those 2 women, and the Irish nanny and the Polish nanny, and how that faith might have helped kindle a sainthood in Blessed Carlo?
I mean, we can probably edit this much more later, because I'm thinking, like, there's not too much is brought up besides the love of the rosary that really comes from the Polish nanny, because she's got the rosary in her pocket, and Carlo's like, hey, what is that? But that was like very young in his life. He didn't even really put 2 and 2 together until he started to realize, oh, wow, she's praying this repetitious prayer, and I need to do this too. So, I mean, he begins to have these little, what he called appointments with Our Lady. He called Mary the first woman he loved absolutely more than anything, next to his mom. Like, so he's like, if anything, Mary's there. And then there's his mom, like, right? So like, and he even told his mom jokingly, Mom, I love you, but I love Mary more. She's the woman of my life. Like, I mean, what kid who's preteens are saying things like this, especially in today's culture where, you gotta have a certain way of look. You gotta you got to like girls a certain way. And it's like, if this is the problem, then there's a confusion of, who you are in your own identity. Not too much on the Irish. I'm sorry. I can't think it off the top of my head. I mean,
yeah, no, and
I know
those
you'll
are the
edit
stories
this.
that I
That's the
had
best
read.
part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. You said something about, kids, they're kind of expected to dress a certain way. And earlier I was sharing what, the typical image of a saint in someone's head typically is, flowing robes and halos and everything. But if you go and see Blessed Carlo Acutis, and we are going to be going on a pilgrimage next year in 2025 for the Jubilee, and we are going to be able to go to Assisi and go to his tomb. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. If you see his body and his tomb, I mean, he's wearing Nikes, right? He's not wearing sandals. He's not wearing Jerusalem Cruisers, right? He's got a pair of Nikes. I think they're, Air Force Ones or something like that, right? So, I mean, this is a kid who's wearing, things that are very familiar, right? That from a cultural standpoint that, you can go see anyone on the street and Blessed Carlo would look fairly similar, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, because being a saint is so far away. It's such a not for me. Like, well, I'm not going to be a saint. How can I be a saint? You have to go and, walk across fire in Egypt for the salt like St. Francis, or you have to have been at the Transfiguration like John and James and Peter, right? Or walk on water with Jesus, right? But that's not the reality. I mean, the only tragedy in life is to not be a saint. And saints can come from anywhere, from any walk of life, and from any age. I mean, there's a great history of young saints in the history of the church. I mean, there's St. Dominic Savio, and there's St. John Berkman's. There's a lot of great young saints. And I think Blessed Carlo continues that tradition and renews it for the people now in the 21st century. Dario, I know that, have you been to his tomb? Have you had experience with that? Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, no, I've every time I go to Assisi now, it's my go-to place. Like, besides visiting St. Francis and St. Clare, which are two amazing saints, you have Carlo Acutis, which, by the way, if nobody knows the name of the church where he's located, which is Santa Maria Maggiore, or the Church of La Spoliazione in Italian, which means the church of the removal of the clothes, because it is right next to the bishop's residence, where, according to the tradition, St. Francis himself stripped of his clothes to remove of his worldly life so that he can live a life solely devoted to the service of our Lord. And how ironic that Carlo wanted to be buried there. Like, he had a deep devotion to St. Francis, And that's technically why, the parents ended up buying a summer house in Assisi. And that's also one of his wishes as he was dying of leukemia. His wish was to be buried there in Assisi, in the town of St. Francis. And when they decided to move his body to this church, because it was so fitting that it would be at the same place where he emptied himself, where St. Francis emptied himself for the service of others, Carlo did the same. And so if you've ever been there and you walk into this church, it's a very simple church, nothing extraordinary about it whatsoever. But once you get to his tomb and you realize, wow, there's something different about this tomb. First off, it's elevated to signify the fact that he wasn't living for this world. He was living for the world to come. So the tomb is elevated. So you'll see that the area that's like where his body is, it's elevated above the ground, and you'll see like a division. And that's the way the artist depicted it. He wanted to depict the fact that Carlo was living for heaven, and that we should live the same way, in a sense, for heaven, right? And around the tomb, you'll see these beautiful little glimpse into his story, these little tiles into this story. And then you get to Carlo's body himself. And I remember when they first unveiled it, and I got these emails saying, "Hey, Dario, is he incorrupt? Is he incorrupt?" And I immediately said, no. I spoke to the Archbishop of Assisi, and he said to me, "Don't tell people that he's incorrupt, because dying of leukemia is a tragic illness that causes the body to swell. And it might not be something that you would be, looking at a body of a saint who has had leukemia is not pleasant. So he has a death mask, so to say, and made of silicone that looks very real. Like, you look at it very closely, you'll be able to tell that's a silicone mask. But if you but if you look at the hands and the face, that is the only that is the only thing you will be able to see physically, but that is his body. That is his body right there. And yes, he wanted to be buried in his favorite tracksuit made from Adidas, even though there's no sponsorship. With like, I will sponsor your canonization process with Nike and Adidas stepping up. But how ironic that it's like two competitors, like Adidas and Nike, like, and his jeans. And he's got Levi's jeans, and so I'm thinking to myself, dude, that he's so 90s, like, because he's got the jeans, he's got the tracksuit, just the top, right? And then he's got the Nike jeans. Remember, he died in 2006. So it's not like he died like most recently, where people are like, what would a millennial wear today versus like what he wore in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, he'd been wearing like tall white socks and flip flops,
Yeah.
Or what is it? The Birkenstocks with socks on. It's like, dude, I get that you want to look like Jesus, but that's not going to help you.
Yeah. So Dario and I met each other at the National Eucharistic Congress, and I was talking to him at a HALLOW function, one of our sponsors, and I mentioned my wife and how the reliquary line was like 3 hours to get in this, and it just so happened that he was in possession of a relic of Blessed Carlo, but he even went a step further. The next day, he had two nuns from Assisi with the pericardium, the heart of Blessed Carlo, and I had an opportunity to pray before him, and it was just so powerful. My daughter didn't show up, and I think she was like lost or whatever, but I was just like so focused on him and just praying for my wife, and literally felt like he was like reaching out to me through Dario, and then my daughter came, and then she was like, "What do I do? I'm holding this relic." And she was kind of confused and just, just like a girl is for the first time doing something like this. And we prayed. The nun grabbed my hand and we prayed, and I've got a beautiful picture of her, where after like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, all of a sudden she felt this connection with him. And it was beautiful. And even today, she's got something in her room with a candle with his face on it, because there was a little face of him next to his heart. And I got to tell you, it was one of the most beautiful moments that I've had with my daughter. I've had many, and it was beautiful. And so just kind of going back to his bones and his remains, and even deeper into the profound impact that saints have, especially through their bones, that God glorifies them in this way that's just so mind-boggling. Me and Ava are trying to tell Joe about this, and Joe's just like, "What, man? Bones?" Like, I was like, my oldest son, and she's trying to explain it to him. It's just so hard to explain. But going before his tomb, I've already heard 2 or 3 people that have been there that are like, "This guy is powerful. God is glorifying this kid, glorifying Jesus Christ through this kid, through his remains." And you have a story too, because you're also in care of some of Blessed Carlo's relics, which I find very profound that you've got his relics in your house. Kind of Catholic jelly over here, but you have a story, going to your World Youth Day. You're because you're really involved with them as an editor for the website, and just really involved in youth. But you had an experience at World Youth Day with his relic. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it kind of like, hit you pretty hard just walking around with his relic.
Well, no, goodness, no. Let's make that clear. Like, the relics are not like treasures to be kept in someone's private home as a collection. If anything, it belongs to the church, right? So I've been blessed to be able to take the pericardium heart of Carlo it's the missionary relic that travels all over the world. It's been in Ireland. It's been in the United States. It's been at the Eucharistic Congress. And it's been at World Youth Day in Lisbon. And I got to tell you, like, was it 35,000 people stopped in this church, very small church in Lisbon. Granted, there's so much going on in Lisbon during World Youth Day, but 35,000 young people stopped during the week to go and basically encounter the Lord Jesus in the Eucharist of the church with Carlo. I want to make that clear, because a lot of people don't understand that about relics too. Is like, you're not encountering the saint per se. You're encountering the Lord Jesus through the power and the intercession of that saint. because we're not disconnected from this life to the next. We're all the mystical body of Christ. And so there's power in each other's prayers and in holding each other up. And I got to tell you, like, I've seen some amazing stories of people who've come, telling me, like, I've been so moved by just being in the presence of Carlo, who was such a simple young boy. I want to be like him. And I said, well, that's amazing. That's exactly why we're here. Like, we brought the relic for that reason, to Lisbon. And then when the National Eucharistic Congress said, hey, can Carlo is our patron for this big Congress, because we're trying to get a revival in the United States of the Eucharist. I said, what better person than a young boy? Because young people are the protagonists of the new evangelization. That's what John Paul II envisioned when he first established World Youth Days. He said, you really want to change the world? Young people, look to them, give them some role or some tasks. Then you look at the story of Carlo and you think, like, well, he was such an ordinary boy, but yet his story has moved thousands and thousands, I would say almost millions, especially since Pope Francis back in 2018 wrote in his letter to young people, said, hey, get to know him. And now here we are in 2024, and we hear that there's already a second miracle. All right, there's more than a second miracle. There's countless miracles that the church has yet to go over and try to figure out. This one just happened to be approved. Like, there's countless more. And, Ryan might not know this, but one of the sisters that you actually met is actually the chancellor to the Diocese of Assisi, who actually cares for the stories that have come in for Carlo's, canonization. And eventually she'll find out, soon or not, from Pope Francis when the date will officially be, when the church will officially recognize him as a saint. But let's be honest, to all of us, he is already a saint. He is already an extraordinary child who lived an extraordinary life of virtue, extraordinary love of the Eucharist. Nothing was ordinary about that, but yet he was so ordinary in his demeanor, ordinary in his way of life. I mean, goodness, what young boy at the age of 14 says to his doctor who has to give him the bad news, hey, just give it to me straight. Like, just tell me what's going on. Like, Carlo, you're dying. And it's a quick, it's not like one of those, it will drag on for months. It's quick. It will literally he will go unconscious and then literally die within weeks. And before he goes unconscious, he tells his doctors, look, I don't give me any painkillers. Don't give me any type of anything. I want to offer up my sufferings for the church, especially for the Holy Father. And remember, he had just seen Pope St. John Paul II pass away from a long suffering of Parkinson's. Like, so he saw what sufferings look like. Suffering. He had a deep devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. He knew, like, the story of the children of Fatima. If anything, he lived Fatima, the Eucharist, the Rosary. And then at the end of his life, he's offering up his sufferings. He reminded me a lot of, like, little Jacinta, who was dying of the Spanish flu. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to suck this up. Don't give me any painkillers. Don't give me anything. I just want to offer it up for all those souls that are falling into the pits of hell, that need God's grace to wake them up, to be realizing of this beauty. That was Carlo. Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned the miracle that he is going to be canonized soon. So they've already announced the canonization. They just haven't announced a date. Now, Ryan and I are hoping that it happens while we're in Assisi, because that would be just absolutely amazing. But from what I was reading, I read this on the Vatican's website, that the second miracle that took place, that will then go from blessed to saint, happened when a woman was praying for her employer's daughter who had massive head trauma from a bicycle accident. And she was kneeling down in that church in Assisi before Blessed Carlos's relics, said a prayer, and this girl recovered from this traumatic head injury. That really shows that power of those pilgrimages, of going to holy places and praying before saints. So we're really excited to be able to be going to Assisi next year in the Jubilee year. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to catholictalkshow.com/Rome. We're going to be going to Rome, where we will have a audience with the Pope, where we will go through the four holy doors of the four major churches of Rome in a Jubilee year. We're going to be going to Assisi, where we'll see the tombs of St. Francis, St. Clare, and Blessed Carlo Acutis. We're also going to be going to Milan, where he lived, where we will be seeing the tomb of St. Ambrose. And then we're also going to be going to Turin, where we will see the Shroud of Turin, and the actually in Milan is where we'll also see the Last Supper. So it's a really great trip. It's very timely. Hopefully, and it would just be so great that we'll be there during the canonization, either of Blessed Carlo Acutis or of Pier Giorgio Frassati, who both will be canonized next year and who are saints for the modern age. So if you want to learn more about that, go to catholictalkshow.com/Rome. Now, the other thing I want to mention, and Ryan brought them up earlier, that's where Dario and Ryan met, was at a function for HALLOW. And HALLOW is the sponsor of our show. And I think that's so fitting this particular episode, because they are doing and continuing, and there's probably a good chance that had Blessed Carlo lived, he'd probably be working with HALLOW. HALLOW takes the best of technology and uses it to bring souls to Christ through prayer. Over 1 billion prayers have been said through the HALLOW app. They have things like the night prayer and examines, and they have all kinds of novenas, they have Bible reflections, they have the rosary, and then they have great guided prayer by people like Father Mike Schmitz and Bishop Robert Barron and Jonathan Rumi and Mark Wahlberg and Sister Miriam and all these great leaders in the church. If you want to try out HALLOW for free, go to catholictalkshow.com/HALLOW. You can get the full premium membership on a trial and see if it's something that works for you. It's a really great app. It has so much stuff, and so many people use it every day to use technology to get closer to the Lord. And that's exactly what Blessed Carlo was doing. So I think in many ways, he could be very much the patron of that app. So we recommend that app, and we'd love to see you try it too. So the canonization, I know that's going to hopefully happen next year, but what would some of his patronages be? I mean, I think they're pretty obvious, but what would Blessed Carlo, now Saint Carlo, what would he be the patron saint of?
I mean, I've someone told me one time as a joke, he'll be the patron saint of the internet, because he knew how to use the internet properly and avoid AI or avoid cheating. Like, for anybody who's a student who uses the internet to always grab stuff, maybe that he could be also the patron saint of students. Because I know there's so many patron saint of students. You got St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Joseph Cupertino, but look at Carlo Acutis. Yeah, he was smart, but yet he was also very savvy in a sense that he knew how to use his time wisely. I definitely liked the idea that he was the all-around teenager that his friends liked. He was well likable. So, I mean, for me, I jokingly even said, if Sony puts like a plug and maybe you want to donate some money to the Carlo Acutis Foundation or something like that, maybe he'll be the patron saint of the PlayStation 1. For those who are still holding on to that, you never know.
PlayStation 1 would technically be a second-class relic.
Probably, yeah. Well, third class, because it never really...
Third class.
Maybe. I mean, if we really want to push it out far, it would be his own PlayStation. But the cool thing is that his mom actually has his room kept the same way as she remembered him in Assisi, that the summer home that they have. I've seen videos and pictures of his room, and it was kept clean and immaculate the way, there's like a typical mother would, like, how do you remember your son? I would think, like, if anything, it would be a question of asking the mother, what kind of a patron saint would he be? Patron saint of young people, patron saint of teenagers, patron saint of the internet, of people who are struggling to find a purpose and meaning in their lives, and maybe even the patron saints of those who just want to do good, especially those who are looking at charitable works. You got like organizations like St. Vincent de Paul, who, by the way, Carlo knew that even in his little money that he had, he gave the money to buy equipment for the poor in his neighborhood. Like, you want to talk about how cool Blessed Pier Giorgio was, that on his death, like he said, the greatest day of my life will be the day that I die, because I will see our Lord. And then what was in the streets of Turin, like all the homeless had gathered to say their goodbyes to Blessed Pier Giorgio. The same could be said about Carlo. Just that his absolute love of neighbor. He had a deep, profound love of God, but he also had a deep, profound love of neighbor.
Speaking of neighbors,
yeah.
One of my favorite story about Blessed Carlo is a couple of years ago, someone was on Reddit and they're like, And they made a post, and this is when awareness of Blessed Carlo started to become more common. Someone's like, I think I'm going to have 5,000 extra years in purgatory because I think I talked shit to Blessed Carlo on the chat rooms of Halo 2 back in 2004. And I think that's, number one, hilarious, and I'm sure Blessed Carlo forgives him, but just how relatable that is, but also, a warning to guard your tongue and emotions, because you never know who you're talking to. But that's just so funny. It's so relatable that, there's someone out there worried that they accidentally were talking smack to a saint on Halo, which is so funny.
I can't think of a saint that, even the saints that are dear to me, I can't think of somebody just so recent, to where we can almost see ourselves literally in his Nikes.
He'd be 33, 34 years old right now.
Exactly. He'd be a middle-aged person working at a computer company, probably doing some amazing things in technology.
Yeah. You work with Fusati or Hollow.
So we got one miracle. There's got to be two?
This was the second miracle, the one that I just said. There was another miracle earlier than that.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And the funny thing is they happen both in Brazil. That's the funny thing. Brazil seems like it's the country where all the miracles are happening. Maybe I should move to Brazil. I was thinking like everybody was praying in Brazil. Brazil really prays. Like maybe we should be the country that prays like that, because we need some American saints, man. I'm just throwing that out there.
Like the Brazilian miracles happening there.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really great that his mom said was kind of, I don't know if they can claim this as a miracle, but she lost her only son, and Blessed Carlo grew up, till the age of 15 as an only child. 4 years to the date of his death, his mother had twins. So she lost one child, and 4 years to the day, she got two back from the Lord. And I have to think that Blessed Carlo had some intercession in that as comfort to his mom and in praying for his future sisters. I have to imagine that.
Well, didn't you hear the story that she actually had a dream, and Carlo was in the dream? Yeah, no, Carlo was in the dream, and he literally said, "Mom, do not feel sorrow for me, for you will not be alone. The Lord will provide you a gift." And she got pregnant with twins, and those twins happened to be at the beatification. And now she is caring for twins. She thought she was never going to have any more kids. It's just the way that God works in divine providence. Like, she didn't think she was going to have any other kids. It was already a miracle that they had Carlo. Yeah. And that's the other beauty of a story like that, because the story hits you like Blessed Carabadano, who the parents tried. Finally, there's a miracle baby. And then ironically, the Lord takes her quickly. And here's Carlo, finally the miracle baby, and then the Lord takes him quickly. And, this is the prayer of surrender of any mother in that situation. What do you do? Like, the Lord, obviously you wanted this child more than I did. And then I just have to surrender. And this is the conversion of the mom, who just absolutely was devastated, but yet prayed for the Lord to give her peace. And then when Carlo appeared in her dream, like, she felt more peace, but she had no idea what that meant, that you'd never be alone. Don't worry. Boom, surprise, you're expecting twins. Wow.
So cool.
Yeah.
So before we go, two things I want to mention. One, if you like the show, if you want to help support us, there's a couple things you can do. Number one, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and click the like and share and subscribe button. That's the easiest way that you could help us reach more people through the apostolate that the Catholic Talk Show runs. You can also go to CatholicTalkShow.com. You can find all the different platforms we're on. We're on all the major socials and all the different things. Whether you listen to us on podcast players on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. So if you're on Spotify, subscribe. If you listen to us on iTunes, leave us a good review. It really helps us reach more people. And if you really want to help us continue the show, you can go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Patreon. And there you can see all the different ways that you could help support the show financially. Just little amounts. We're not asking for mortgage money. We're not asking for your car payment. Just pocket change, right? Just a couple things to help the show, help us pay for the editors, help us to continue to do what it is that we do. And in gratitude, we have a lot of great gifts that we send to you in return. Coffee cups, hoodies, hats, prayer devotionals. We really appreciate it. It really is the way that we're able to continue to do this show. The last thing I want to mention then is, Dario, can you tell us a little bit more about your work with worldyouthday.com and what you do there and how people can find out more about that and how they can support that?
Yeah, no. So basically, worldyouthday.com was the fruit of John Paul II's vision for the young church, especially because the young church has been the protagonists of this new evangelization to bring about the person of Christ Jesus to the ends of the earth. This encounter that we have with our Lord Jesus at World Youth Day needs to be spread out throughout the world. And so World Youth Day has been a pivotal thing in bringing about vocations, about, this call to holiness. And I'm sure Carlo would have loved to have attended World Youth Day if he could have, right, in his young age. But, our work is just to make sure that the story of what John Paul II envisioned stays authentic and alive from one papacy to the next. So that way we don't forget the vision that John Paul II saw for young people, that they may be the morning watchmen at the dawn of the millennia, he called, like to go out and be those witnesses shouting the gospel from the rooftops. So we write about the World Youth Days. We help the local organizing committees in preparing to help everyone from all over the world know that there's a continuity of this story, so that it doesn't end with one papacy and then it starts a new one with another one, that it doesn't end with one site and goes to the other. But look at the fruits that happened in the United States with Denver. And look at how much it's changed the United States as we know it. And look at what's happening now all over the world. Every time a World Youth Day is held, young people are mobilizing and young people are going, to the ends of the earth to be witnesses. And that's what we want people to see, that there is hope in the young church. Don't discredit them. Don't put them aside. Carlo knew, and that's why he was who he was. And that's why we write what we do, and that's what we do. So, the biggest thing that your support is just go check out our work at worldyouthday.com and then go to an event. Bring your family to World Youth Day. Have people get to know what World Youth Day is about. And if you've been to World Youth Day, share your story with us. We'd love to hear more testimonies so that we can share with the local organizing committee. The next World Youth Day is going to be held in Seoul, Korea in 2027. Mind you, this is like mission territory, like in an area where the laity brought the faith to the Korean peninsula. And now you're going to be able to bring your witness, your model, your example, your faith to a continent that direly needs your witness. And so that's what we do. That's what we're all about. And I want nothing more than people to not only go to World Youth Days, but bring that message back to the rest of the world. That's awesome. And so that's kind of our work.
Yeah, Dario, we really appreciate you joining us. Really appreciate the work that you do with worldyouthday.com. I know Ryan and his family really appreciate how you brought access to the relic. Blessed Carlo Acutis is just such a wonderful example of how you can live sanctity and holiness in today's world, where it seems like everything is just complete distraction and devices rule your life, and all the concupiscence and all the desires that marketing tell to you, and that you can still live and be a simple saint in today's world. So let's continue to ask for Blessed Carlo's intercession. When we go there next year, again, if you want to go on that pilgrimage with us, you can go to catholictalkshow.com/Rome. I'm really looking forward to be able to venerate his relics and get to know more about him there. We really want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Go out and say a prayer to Blessed Carlo. We'll put links to the website for worldyouthday.com. And also I'm going to put a link in the show notes below or on the webpage so you can go see the website that Blessed Carlo built for all these different Eucharistic miracles. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your support. Make sure to click like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next week.